Hey guys, how you guys doing? This is Curtis from the Facebook Turks here with another video here for the multi-part series. This is just a continuation from the previous video, which was about ice and what to expect, what cards they play and what the strategy is and how to get around the cards that they play. So for this one, this is going to be for lightning, and the same thing as before. The strategy behind this video is once you watch it, you'll be able to know exactly what cards are being played by lightning, and you'll be able to know how to play around them, what they're trying to do, and then, things that basically what to expect when you play against them. So as soon as you see someone drop some purple cards, you can know, oh, okay, so this is going to be an option, this is what could happen if I do this. So it's going to basically help you play around that archetype and just be better as a player. So for lightning, basically what they do as a color is they do a lot of breaking cards, and they do a lot of ping damage. So they do a lot of things that have incremental damage that kind of stack on top to break your forwards. And they're also very fast, and they do have a lot of cards that have haste, so that kind of lets them get in extra damage for free. And then also they do a fair amount of dulling, so be very careful if you're kind of relying on the one card. They could basically make that target, the blocker, invalidated by just dulling it and just getting that extra damage in for the win. Mono Lightning has pretty much been around for a very long time. It's been a top tier deck ever since Opus II, basically with the introduction of Al Cid. So with Mono Lightning, it's kind of been the same for the entire time though, so it's not very different from what it was before. It's basically the same idea, it's just new cards just kind of make it better, and depending on the build, they'll focus on different forwards that are cost 3 or less. So you just kind of have to roll with the punches, and if you know what one lightning deck does, you pretty much know what all of them do. But let's go ahead and get right into it. The first card that we're going to talk about is Al Cid, and it's no surprise there. He's basically the backbone of Mono Lightning. Basically what he does is, if you don't know, they can pick one of your forwards, an active forward, and they can play a lightning forward of 3 or less from their hand for free, and if they do so, they deal that card 6,000 damage. So common cards that go with Al Cid would be the Rigdia, and then also Onion Knight, as you see on the screen. With Rigdia, they're going to be able to do something 9,000 damage, which usually does kill pretty much anything that they're trying to, and if that does happen, they get a dull on the card, so they can get free damage in that way. If they do it with Onion Knight, they'll do 11,000 damage in total, which will definitely kill almost anything in the meta. So if you have that one active forward, be very careful. It could get all Cidded, so you just have to understand that's a possibility. Sometimes you could try to bait it out, which is one way to get around all Cid. Let them just kill the less important card, and then you play the actual important one, and now they pretty much don't have that option anymore. Another way to deal with Al Cid is you can actually make his target invalidated and just make it fizzle out. So if you have any way to dull your own forward, the one that they pick, you can basically make it so they can't play that forward for free, and they basically wasted the Al Cid because it's a legal play. It's a forward that can be played on the board. So if you have any way to dull your card in response, you're going to be golden. A couple cards that let you do that would be like Glacier Labosa if you're playing Ice. If they play Al Cid and they target your card, you can actually dull your own forward, make him discard, which really punishes him pretty hard. If you're playing Lightning, or you're playing anything that does have a Lightning card in it, if they pick your forward, you can actually play Ramu, or Rama, however you want to say it. You can actually dull your own forward, and then deal Al Cid 7,000 damage, or anything else on the board for 7,000, and that's another way to basically get around Al Cid too. Also, any card that doesn't take any damage, like Y'shtola, the Wind one, will be very good as well. They can play the forward, but it just won't die, so you'll be able to block them as well. Al Cid does work with plenty other cards in any Lightning deck too, because pretty much everything is 3 or lower, so any card could be a possibility with it. The next cards that we'll talk about would be one of those targets they could possibly play. So both of these cards is basically what lets Lightning do what they're trying to do, which is basically a game of chicken. What I mean by that is they usually want to build up backups. They try to get to 5 as soon as possible, so that way their days are more valuable, and also they can play pretty much any card that they want to. However, the problem with Lightning has always been, if you don't play any forwards, they can't really do anything, and they just lose out value. So with the introduction of Alua, and also Hildebrand as well. It lets them get around that issue. They could just play a card now and swing, hit you for a point of damage, and now you have to respond. Because if you don't respond, obviously they're just going to kill you. But if you do play a forward, now you're playing their game, so now they can actually play cards that break your forwards, like Alcid, play more things on the board, and then now you have to deal with more forwards than before. And that's basically what Lightning really tries to do. They try to build up backups, and then they'll get the swings in with the Lua and Hildebrand, force you to play something, so now that they have targets to basically break. With Lua, she, in my opinion, should have been a legend. She's actually very, very good. And if you're a new player, you have to know what she does, because she can basically win a game just by herself. What makes her so good is that she has a spell shield on her, which basically means that if you try to target her with an ability or a summon, she will cancel it, cancel the whole thing. So even if it's a card that has multiple targets, like a 2-drop Shiva, which dulls 2 forwards, if one of those targets is Lua, the other one will not be dulled, because the whole card will be canceled. So you have to be very careful about that. So if you have any card that targets multiple cards, it's going to get canceled, and now you're going to be left without that option. So the best way to get around her is try to use something that's very cheap to target her, and then play the actual important card to deal with her. So if you're playing like Wind and you have Cactar, you can just ping the Cactar for free, target her for 1,000, let it fizzle out, and then do whatever you need to do to get rid of the card. Also, which is another issue that comes up a lot whenever ruling comes up, are X-Bursts. If an X-Burst comes off the top and you choose a Lua, she will get affected by that card. So if it's something that deals her damage and she'll die, she will die. She does not get around X-Bursts just because X-Bursts don't go on the stack, so she's not able to kind of respond to it. It just happens, and then she triggers afterwards, but most of the time she's already off the board. However, if an X-Burst comes off the top that does not kill her, and instead just targets her, like let's say Belias from Fire, and you target that card and then you draw a card, it does get rid of her spell shield, because she will trigger afterwards, and now you can do whatever you want to her to get her off the board. She will be targeted by those effects, and that's all, it's all golden for you. Another thing about Lua is she can actually be used to close out games. Her S ability is very strong, and it's just pitch a copy of a Lua, which doesn't require any other resources, which is very, very, very good. Basically what it does is all the forwards on their side get activated, and all your forwards lose 2,000 power. So if it's late game, they can basically play like Al said, kill a card, and then already have Lua on board. They can use a Lua special, ready everything, and you lose 2,000. And then they just swing with everything, because now everything is haste. So that's one way that they can close out a game. With Hildebrand, he's a little bit easier to deal with than a Lua is, but he's very strong, and he's basically, I think he is Lightning's strongest forward with Lulu on board, other than maybe Kane. But what Hildebrand does is if he's ever broken by a card that does not deal damage or reduces his power, if he's just straight up broken, he will return back to that player's hand. So if you Shanto to the board or use Chaos Walker or anything like that, or if even like a Famfrit, he'll just leave, get put back into their hand, and just play him again for without really losing anything, and then you're still looking at the same problem. He probably has haste with the backup Nashu, and he's just going to be able to constantly do that damage. Best way to deal with him would be to either kill him by combat or do ping damage as well, so that way it just kind of stays in the grave afterwards. Alright, now the next card that we're going to talk about is Zemus, and it's basically the most important forward that Lightning pretty much has. Zemus is very strong for one. With Lulu on board, he's at 9,000 power, and that's very difficult to deal with. But basically what he does is every turn, if you do not kill him the first turn he's played, unless he's given haste, he's going to be able to bring a forward out for whatever cost from the break zone. So if they start getting rid of their Alcids, or if they start getting rid of Aluas or the Hillbrands, if they play Zemus and you don't deal with them, next turn they'll just bring it right back, and now you're looking at the same problem over and over and over again. So whenever you're playing against Lightning, you want to save your removal for Zemus, just because, like I said before, they have basically one turn before they can actually use that effect, unless they give him haste. And you want to be able to make sure that either he never stays active, so that way they can never use the ability, or you want to just be able to kill it outright. So try to save your big removal for Zemus whenever you think you're about to see it. So the next cards we're going to talk about are pretty much like the boss monsters for Mono Lightning. These cards basically help close out the game. So Estinian is a card from the new set, and basically what he does is he just finishes games. If the Lightning player has 5 backups, he does have haste, and whenever he attacks, if you decide to block, he will break the forward. Now keep in mind that Estinian does not target, he does not choose a forward, it just simply dies. So Camelot will not get around Estinian, Ranger, the Wind one, will not get around Estinian. Both of them will die if you decide to block with them, so don't bank on that as your answer for Estinian. And another thing about Estinian, you can actually attack twice in a turn, because after they swing with them, they can pay 1 lightning and reactivate them, and they can attack again. So keep that in mind if you're at like 5 damage and they have 5 backups. They'll probably have an Estinian pretty ready, so you want to save your removal for that, just in case. So that way you don't have to just die if they play Estinian. Other ways to get around Estinian are cards that just can't be broken unless they're dealt damage. So if you're playing Scions, Y'shtola is going to be pretty good against them, so that way you can just force a trade. Old School Vincent's pretty good against them too. They can't be broken, so you just basically do the same thing, force a trade, or if you have a Yuffie on board or something like that, you can get over on top. But usually you just want to save your removal for Estinian and Zemus, so that way you don't have to deal with that. Alright, so the next card is Adea. She's not very strong, but her effect is very good and kind of plays off what Lightning is trying to do. So Lightning is always trying to ramp up and have like 5 backups, so that way they can play pretty much anything that they want. And with Adea, it can break a forward of the cost equal to or less than the amount of Lightning backups that they control. So if you have a bunch of 5-drops or anything like that, if they have 5 backups, they can just play Adea and just simply break it, which is very, very, very good. She's not very strong, but her effect's very good too. She has an S ability where she can just discard a copy of herself and pay 4 lightning, and they can just kill any forward as well, regardless of cost. So Adea is pretty much the crux of what my list is around, the one that Steven played for his LCQ win. Basically just abuses Adea as much as possible, and it does use the new Adea backup, which is from the new set, to kind of just use that effect as many times in one turn. So a common play that they might be able to do if they're playing the backup Adea is they set up 5 backups with Adea being one of those backups. They can pop the Adea, bring Adea from the break zone, and now they have 4 backups, so now they can pick a target that's 4 costs or less, and they'll be able to break it. And then, since they have 4 open backups, they can just tap those, get rid of a copy of Adea from their hand, and break something else for free. So that's basically a good 2 for 1. It's not uncommon for them to do it again if they have another copy of Adea, because the backups do contribute to that S ability. So if they're playing multiple backups named Adea, they can just pitch those from the hand if they already control one, so that way they can just keep on breaking forwards. Now, one way to deal with her is, again, any card that can't be broken by anything that's dealt damage, like Y'shtola. Pretty good against Adea. Also, you can respond by breaking a backup before they can actually get the ability on the stack. So if they play Adea and choose your card, let's say they do that exact play that I said, where they break the Adea to target the forward of cost 4, you can respond by playing Archer, the Wind Archer, or maybe the 3-drop Heka, and just break one of their backups, and now it's not a legal target anymore because they only have 3. They've already chosen the target, so they can't just pick something else. It just fizzles away and just stops. At that point, if they do have the backups, they can, if they really needed to die, they'll be forced to use that ability to kill that forward, and it does not feel good for the Lightning player at all. And that's probably the best way to deal with Adea in that kind of fashion, just because a lot of times they are banking on that forward to be broken by Adea's effect, so if you're able to stop it, it's pretty good for you. And especially when I play in tournaments, if they try to do that same play to me, if I'm able to break it back up, I usually win the game because of it, just because they just lose a lot of advantage, because she's pretty expensive to play. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the backups, the first one being that Adea backup. But the next one that we're going to talk about is Red Mage, and this is pretty much the bread and butter of Lightning's backup line. This has been here since the start of the game, but it ironically is one of the best Lightning backups in the game. And basically what it does, you could choose any forward, give it haste until the end of the turn. So they use this card to basically win the game a lot. I've used this card tons of times whenever I'm ready to close out a game. Just break something, dull something, and then, give that forward haste. And then you just swing for that for surprise damage, and usually they're like 5 or 6 just because of Alua. And then from there you're able to close out games that way. However, if you are playing Mono Lightning and you're playing in the mirror match, you can actually use this card to get rid of Alua. So it's a little tricky play that you can do. You can use Red Mage's ability. You can pick their Alua, give it haste, and you can get rid of the spell shield, and then you can do like remove to get rid of it, or else it, or whatever you wanted to do. That's one good way to get rid of it. And also another application for Red Mage too. So if you're playing Mono Lightning and you're playing like Aemon, you can also do the same thing. They play Alcid, target your Aemon, you give your Aemon haste, and then use his ability to dull itself, dull something else, and now you get rid of Alcid's effect and it just fizzles and goes away. So there's a lot of applications that you can use for this card, so just keep in mind of all the different uses you can use it for. Alright, so the next one is going to be Scholar. And what Scholar does is, for one, it helps deal with the Layla Viking package. So if you're playing water and you have a big board of like Layla, Viking, and you're at like a lot of damage already, be careful. If they have Scholar, they can just pretty much pop it, get rid of both those targets, and now you have a free and open board. They usually use Scholar with Alcid too, so they can play Alcid, bring out Alua or Hildebrand, and deal something 6,000, and then they use a Scholar to pop something for 3 to deal 9,000 to kill it. And if they can target something else too that's active, and at that point if they swing, you have to make that decision. Do I trade with it? Do I take the damage to stabilize next turn? And it can be a pretty good mind game at that point too. Alright, so Seymour is one of those examples of lightning cards that just straight up break a forward, and this time it's in the form of a backup. Usually every lightning list plays one Seymour. It's a very good card. Not only do they get the break a forward for 4 cost, but they also get a backup that they get to keep, and now it adds to their resources, and now they're able to use that for CP for future turns. So keep in mind, this card exists, so don't be surprised if that ends up being played on you. Alright, so there's a shit ton of cards here. And basically, Lightning has a lot of cards that tutor for other things in the deck. So not all of these are super relevant, but however, most of them are. So just going down this list, Cid Clan Gully gets back any Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2 card from the deck and puts it in your hand. They're going to be searching Lua to use that at low special, or at least get on the board. They can play Gramus to either search out a copy of Alcid, so that way they can Cid you, which is the backbone of the deck, so don't be surprised if they're playing it. King of Burmecia can get a copy of Estinian to close out the game. And then Duke Coltana can search out Zalbag if they're still playing it to break a forward of cost 2. Or they could be searching it like a Ramsey or something like that to basically clear forwards off your board. So you have to be very careful about that. All of these are very real cards, and Lightning has a ton of searching. So, just be mindful that they can pretty much search anything that they want, depending on what their list is being built around. The last backup I want to talk about, though, is Aricia, and she is actually very, very good, and you'll probably be seeing her as the meta progresses. What she does is she's able to filter through the deck for summons. So all these cards search for forwards, basically. Almost all of them do. Well, most of them do. This one searches for any kind of summon, as long as they have a summon in their hand. So a lot of times, Mono Lightning players will draw into copies of 7-drop Odin. They could basically use this card to get rid of it in toolbox for any summon that will help them out on that turn or the following turn. They can kind of blow you out for it, so just be careful. And they can also use this mid-stack, so if you use an effect and you're trying to get it to go off, they can actually use this on the stack, get rid of the other summon, and then find the more useful one and play that exactly at that turn, and just kind of, respond to whatever you have that way. Alright, so for the summons in Lightning, the most common one is that 7-drop Odin. This is pretty much what everyone pictures when they see Mono Lightning, and whenever you attack, you always have to be careful about this card coming off the top, because if it does come off the top, it just simply breaks any forward in the game. So It's very annoying, and it does pretty much win games if it's like, at a very crucial point. The best ways to get around it is by playing cards like Camelot. Just call lightning and they can't choose it, so that way you get to keep your forward. Wall also gets around this as well. You just say that no experts can target forwards, and you attack. If this comes off the top, then it really feels bad for them because they don't get to do anything. And then also, like before, cards that can't be dealt damage, cards that have to be dealt damage to die, like Ishtola, also very good in this kind of situation too. And keep in mind for cards like Ishtola or like Old School Vincent, if they play an Odin or like an Adea and target the card, it's still a legal target. It is a legal target, so that way the card just doesn't die. The effect happens, but nothing breaks, and now they kind of lose out on that opportunity, so keep that in mind too. Alright, so Rama is a very good card, and it's from this set as well. So it's given Lightning a lot of different options, and it's probably the biggest reason as to why you don't see Monsters being played anymore, and that's why I'm not playing Monsters this format, because of this card. It just does a lot of things for 3 CP, and it's a tremendous card, and it's very, very, very good. Reading down what the card does, it does choose one monster of cost 2 or less, you could break it. You can choose one forward of cost 4 or less, and you can dull it. You can choose an active forward and deal it 7,000 damage, or you can choose a lightning forward and give it haste until the end of the turn. And you can pick 2 of those 4 options. So make sure you maximize, the defects that you're using, just keep in mind that this card exists. So if you're playing monsters, try not to bank on that one layout going off, because if you're playing against lightning, they could just break it, and it feels really bad if you've already dulled everything, and you're relying on that one thing to activate everything. That can probably lose you the game. And then you can also use this card to get around Alcid too. Like I said before, they play Alcid, they target your forward, you play Rama, you dull your own card, you deal something 7,000, and then you're all good to go. So that's one application for it. You can try to play around it by playing cards that like either, like you can have like maybe Minwu to not take damage if you have like 8k or something like that. But other than that, it's really hard to play around this card, and it does blow out games a lot. So just keep that in mind that this card exists. So if you are able to play around it, just do your best. Alright, so for these 2 cards, these are pretty much the only combat tricks that Lightning has at its disposal, other than a Lewis special. And if you noticed, a lot of the forwards within Lightning are very, very weak. Alcid is 6,000 power, and he's a 4-drop, so he's definitely under curve. Onion Knight is at 6,000 power. Alu is at 6,000 power, and the list kind of goes on. Even Adea, which is a 6-drop, is at 6,000 power, so she's really, really weak. Whenever Lightning is being paired against any forward that's higher than itself, you can't really swing too much just because you're just definitely weaker. But Cyclops and Quetzalcoatl get around that issue. Cyclops pretty much makes every forward on the opponent's side lose 3,000 power, and Quetzalcoatl makes something lose 2,000, and then one of your cards gain 2,000 as well. So for these cards, another reason why they're good is Cyclops is definitely seeing more play now, just because of the whole Viking situation and also Turbo Ice. So all the Laylas have 3,000, the Vikings have 2,000, so if you have a board of like Layla and Viking and stuff like that, they can just play Cyclops and just get rid of the whole board, so just be careful about that, and it is experts too. If you're playing Turbo Ice, the same thing can happen to you. Argith is at 3,000, Snow's at 3,000, the DGS is at 3,000, Thermaturge can possibly be at 1,000, so this is a very real card that you have to be very careful about. Okay, so for Exodus, this is one card that a lot of new players just don't know that it exists, and because of that, they get punished very hard for this. Exodus is the only board wipe that Lightning has, and it's not perfect either. So basically what it does is both players select one number, any forward with that number dies. If you're a new player and they play Exodus on you, you don't have to say a number that's on the board, so you don't have to feel like you have to say whatever number that you control. So if you have like a 2-drop and a 4-drop, you don't have to say 2 if they call 4. You can just say any number like 55, 176, 69, anything like that. Doesn't really matter. As long as you say a number, that's all that the card requires. Some ways to get around this is just play forwards of different costs on the board, especially if you're winning, especially if you are on the aggression. And just like lightning, just like ice, the deck doesn't do very well if they're on defense, just because, like I said before, their forwards are very weak. So if you're able to kind of push and damage, and you have like wall on the board to get rid of experts, there's really not much that they can do other than like a Cyclops and a Quetzalcoatl. So if you have like a 4-drop on the board, try to play like a 3-drop as well, and if possible, play something of a different cost as well, so that way they play Exodus, it's only going to be a 1-for-1, which definitely does not feel good, and most of the time a lot of players won't play it if that's the case, just because they want that maximum value, so just don't give them anything to really board wipe with. So if you're playing like Earth, try not to play too many 4-drops at once, because if they do play Exodus, then it's going to feel really bad when you lose everything. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so the last summon that I want to talk about is Raiden, and this card isn't seeing too much play right now, but the reason why I include it on this list is you'll probably see it being played within the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks. Raiden's very expensive, but basically what it does, it's basically what Nidhogg is, except it just does it to 2 forward and breaks another thing. So it does get around cards like Ash, and that's the reason why you'll probably see it being played again, because people are starting to play Ash and Wrestler again. If they have Ash and Wrestler on the board, nothing in Mono Lightning can pretty much kill it. It's very hard to deal with it, and they have to deal combat damage to basically get rid of the card. However, if the opposing player is playing Bismarck or anything like that, it's not going to be too valuable if they play Cyclops, because if they play Bismarck, you're probably still going to be weaker than Ash, and you're just going to lose out. So there's really nothing that they can do in that kind of situation. So you'll probably see Raiden being played again. So just be mindful that this card can make a comeback, and just adjust accordingly. If you can make them play cards each turn, try to do that, so that way they'll have enough CP to play Raiden. That's one way to deal with it. Just try to play around it that way, especially if you're able to play aggressive. Okay, so for monsters in Mono Lightning, they don't really play too many monsters in the metagame right now for Lightning, just because the forwards just do a good job of clearing things, and you really don't have to do too much other than Alua most of the time and El Cid, so there's really not too much space for the monsters either. However, Colossus is a monster that's starting to see a lot of play within Mono Lightning. It's from the new set too, and one of the plus is that you can use its effect for free and just turn it into a forward of 7,000 power. And if Lulu is on the board, then it's going to be 8,000 power, so it's going to be a good blocker. They could basically just play this card, and it almost has hexproof because it is a monster, so it's going to get around of effects that break forwards because it's very hard to interact with. But if you are using this card to attack, you can deal something 1,000. Well, you deal everything 1,000 on the opponent's side of the board, and that way it lets it trade up. So that way, if it swings with 7,000 and deals 1 to everything, it's really at 8,000 power. And if Lulu's on the board, it's really at 9,000 power. So it's going to be tricky for the opponent to decide if they want to block, because they could possibly lose something really valuable. Also, a lot of cards do combo off of this as well, so like the 2-drop Black Mage can break any damage forward, so they can basically snipe anything that's problematic on your board. They can use this attack, deal everything 1,000, and then use a Black Mage to break a card because it is damaged, and that way they can just get it off the board entirely. Also, 5-drop Orlando, the Theatrhythm version, does break any forward that is damaged, so they can use that, the same application, swing with the card, deal everything 1,000, and then, kill the most important card off of your board. So just keep in mind, if this card is being played, they might have cards like that to kind of play off of that theme. And then also they might be playing cards like McQuee, which give a lightning forward first strike if it's attacking. So they could possibly use this to clear any problematic forward of like 8,000 power, 9,000 power if they have Lulu on board. So just be careful about that. Alright, so other than Colossus, there really aren't any other monsters that are being played in Mono Lightning, but some builds might play Dragon. Dragon is a very good card, and it's basically a 4-drop Odin, except that has a little bit more uses because you can kill a monster. So other than that, it pretty much does what it says on the card. You can break a monster 4-drop or less, or you can break a forward of 4 cost or less. So it's very versatile, very good. It's probably one of the better monsters that Lightning has at its disposal, so just be careful if you happen to see this. They could possibly just clear your board very quick and get in that points of damage. And Twilight Odin is something that was used in the previous Opus. It's very good, but you don't see it too much now, just because there really isn't much space for it, and then also not a lot of people are playing the Opus V Lightning Legend. Basically what she did was, if you control a 5 Fantasy 13 character on the board, so Twilight Odin would fit that description. You can dull something on the board, and if she attacks, you can also dull something as well, and she did have haste, so you could possibly dull 2 forwards just off that 1 card, and then from there, the board usually is clear. You swing with Twilight Odin, and then you break any forward after you deal damage to the player. The problem with this card is that it is kind of expensive for Mono Lightning. They usually like to play 3-drops, and they usually like to build up backups too, so Twilight Odin could take a while to set up. Also, you see this coming from a mile away if they play the Twilight Odin, so you have opportunities to kind of plan what you need to do to make sure that you don't take damage. But other than that, it's still a good card, and if you see it being played, make sure you know that what it's trying to do, so just don't let it hit you so that way you don't have to break it forward. Alright, so right now we're just going to go ahead and talk about some lists for Mono Lightning, because like I said before, Mono Lightning has pretty much been the same ever since Opus 2. They just get new cards that just make it a little bit better each time, but the builds are very similar as to what they're trying to do. So for here, this list was played by Trevor. I played against them in the RVA Soldier Series, where I got this removal from. He's a very good player, and he also performed very well at the LCQs. He got on top cut many times, and he almost took it away from Steven when he played against him in Maryland. But his build here, it's very fast. It's very concentrated on 3-drop 4s like Alua and Hildebrand in order to get that damage in quick and early, and they're very hard to get off the board, and then from there he just plays a standard Lightning package to get rid of cards and basically close out the games. If you look at the list, you'll see all the cards that I mentioned here. You'll see the Rigdia, you'll see the Onion Knight, the Alcid combo. He's also playing 3 copies of Hildebrand, 3 copies of Alua. And he's also playing Zemus, Estinian, and the Ideas. So he's pretty much playing all the 4s that I mentioned because, like I said before, Mono Lightning lists aren't very much different from each other. He's playing the Cyclops to deal with the Viking package, and then he also has the 5-drop Orlando from Opus 1, which when he attacks he does 3,000 to everything on the board on the opponent's side. So he's also a good option for that Turbo Ice matchup and the Viking matchup too. He's also playing the Exodus, so he does have that board wipe if the opponent's not careful and they play forwards at the same cost. He's playing 3 copies of Ramu or Rama. He's playing 7-drop Odin, of course, like every Mono Lightning player should. And for the backups, he did go for the City Clan Gullies to get the Alua special, or Search for the Alua, and he's playing 3 copies of Remage, and he's playing Scholar too. So he's playing all these cards that are pretty much on the list, just because they do synergize with each other. And like I said before, the strategy of the deck, you just kind of build up backups, you play the Alua and the Hildebrand, you get damage, force the player to respond and try to get rid of those cards, and they'll be behind on card advantage, and then you start playing like your Alcids and things like that to kind of just close out the game from there and just overrun them before they can really do anything. Alright, and this list is the list that I built for Steven, so that way he can get his LCQ win in Maryland. Basically with this list, it's pretty much the same concept as the other one. You build up backups as fast as possible. You have the summoners, the 1-drop summoners to basically ramp faster. But the difference between this and the previous list is I don't play Hildebrand. Instead, I opt to just play like Alua and use her to get early damage. And then from there, I have more copies of Zemus to get cards back. And then I also have more backups to kind of abuse a day as well to get more pops So that way I play the Lua, get points of damage, you're forced to deal with it, and then once you build up your board, I either Alcid you or set up the Idea plays like when I mentioned the backup Idea. So you build up the 5, you pop the Idea back up, you bring out Idea, break a forward, a 4 cost or less, then tap those 4, get rid of another copy of Idea, break another forward, and then that's usually enough to close out a game. That's pretty much what this list does. But overall, that's pretty much Mono Lightning in a nutshell. It's kind of one-dimensional now that I think about it. Mono Lightning just does the same things. Just ping damage, break cards, play Alcid, play a Lua, swing, give everything haste, break your cards, things like that. But like I said before, it's not an impossible deck to beat. In fact, it's pretty much easy to beat, especially if you're in Pennsylvania. You're playing the Mono Water package with Ash and Wrestler. That's one way to get rid of Mono Lightning and not let it beat you up. Cards like Ash will get around Mono Lightning, and it's just basically a counter to the deck itself. Cards like Ishtola, very good against Lightning. The Wind Ranger, very good against Lightning. There's a lot of things that you can do to deal with Lightning, like especially New Zidane Legend. You can also use that to kind of get around all the forwards, so that way they can't target anything. You just get to look at their hand for free each turn. You just have to make sure you don't get removed or anything like that. But other than that, hopefully this video helps. Hopefully you'll know what to do against Lightning and what the cards do. And so that way you're not caught with your pants down if they do something. You should know exactly what Lightning tries to do. You should know all the major cards in Lightning, and hopefully this helps. The next video will actually be about Earth. So that's another common color that people play, and there are a lot of cards in Earth that a lot of new players don't know about, and it can be very frustrating to be hit with those cards, especially if you didn't know that it was a possibility. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm going to try to release that video later on the same week, just because this video should have came out a little bit earlier, so I do apologize about that. Just kind of caught up with other things on the channel, like the podcast episodes and traveling out to other tournaments. But that's the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you liked what you saw, like and subscribe. Just keep in mind for all the other great content that we're starting to produce. Have a great day.